relationship counselor Elizabeth Overstreet. Everyone has this vision in their mind of what marriage is, how romantic they want it to be, how they're going to raise their children, what the core values are going to be in that relationship. But often we don't tell each other totally what that vision is.
Welcome back to another episode of Bad Talk. So we are so excited. Miss Elayna Fernandez, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Elizabeth. I just really am so excited to be here with you.
So Elayna, I don't think I can do you justice because she's a very humble woman, but she's a very accomplished woman and mother. She also is the founder of a website called Positive Moms. She is a 4-time TEDx speaker. Yay! For that, it takes a lot of work to get on a TEDx stage. And I want her to also talk about just some of the other things she's done. She's worked with Les Brown before as well, who helped to cultivate some of her speaking habits. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got started on your journey.
Oh, thank you so much for asking that. I'm really, really grateful that you talked about my daughters because being a mom is my most sacred calling. And I have 4 daughters. 3 are living at home and they are 20, 19, 9, and 3. So they're a lot of fun and there are different adventures and different challenges at each stage. And that's why I'm really passionate and really my mission is to help moms break cycles, find peace, and really feel whole. Because when we do that, when we are able to tap into that peaceful, playful, present, and on purpose embodiment, we are able to actually create a peaceful environment for our children, and we are influential to the world. So I have my Positive Mom community that I founded, and like you said, my Positive Mom blog, and I have books and programs to help moms achieve that. And I'm also on the journey with them in the trenches working on that because it's an ever-growing journey.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is we hear this very calm. This woman has had, some journeys or challenges as well. I was fortunate enough to participate in a program she helps to facilitate for, and she shared some of the things that happened to her. So she didn't just wake up one day and say, "I'm gonna be this positive mom." There were like a lot of things that happened along the way. So I don't know.
Process, huh?
It's been a process. So I don't know how deep you want to go into that because it's super emotional.
Yes, I love the work that I do because it's called positive. It's the positive mom. And yet we have this misconception out there that in order to be positive, we need to bypass our pain. And I've been through a lot of painful experiences, but the main takeaway is that in order to actually process that pain, we need to validate it. And we need to say, hey, I went through that and it was hard and it was painful and it was horrible, and we really get real because if we don't accept it, we can't heal it. And so that's why I tell my story. And it is true that a lot of people will say, oh, I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to share what I went through because it's a victim space. And being a victim is not an issue because you didn't choose to be a victim. And so I was born a victim, someone that is innocent and then starts to become abused. And I grew up in a very dysfunctional environment in extreme poverty, as you know. I grew up in a slum in the Dominican Republic, and all of the basic needs that most children have, we didn't have them. We also were afraid. We were also terrified every day for the things that we saw around us and within, I would say walls of our home, but we didn't have really walls, and we didn't have a toilet, and we didn't have electricity or plumbing. We really were surviving each day. And when you live in that kind of childhood and that kind of community, you learn very young that number one, you can't trust anyone. Number two, that life is more painful and harder for you. And number three, that you are kind of the trash of society. And those are the messages that we send people that live in poverty, or people that go through trauma, or people that quote unquote are victims, because we have a stigma about pain. So, fast forward to when I was 7 years old. I always like to tell this story because it's so beautiful and talks so much about the power of a vision. I was able to, after my brother and I fetched our water, we took this little break and went to the dump, which was the landfill behind our little home where we lived. And this was so magical for us. I can't talk about it without a smile on my face, because my brother and I would just like go into that trash and just find the coolest things, and find things to play with, and sometimes to eat. But it was just like a magical adventure. My daughters joke, because we like puns, and they say a land filled with adventure. And so we found this magazine, and we call it Iglets because it was highlights, but we didn't speak English. And somebody had thrown away that magazine. And I know that you've heard that somebody else's trash can become your treasure, right? It's another person's treasure. So that was a big treasure for me, because I saw things in that magazine through illustrations and pictures that I didn't even know were possible for children. And I get chills because I didn't think they were possible for families to have that kind of love, that kind of connection, that kind of safety, and also that kind of prosperity. And it opened my eyes to what I could be, and what I could do, and what I could have. And that's the main thing that I learned. And at 7 years old, I became an entrepreneur because I started doing this cardboard puppet theater. See, I can't even pronounce that very well, but it was fun. And I started storytelling, and that's when I fell in love with telling stories that were inspired by this magazine, and the vision that represented for me. And I made the decision that forever changed my life, which was to learn English, because I made it up in my mind that if I learned this language, I could actually have this life. And, it's interesting because I didn't know what I was doing at that time, but now I know that I was locking into the power of a vision, and something that got ingrained in my brain. And I started working toward that vision. And by the time I was 11, I had saved enough to enroll myself in English classes. And so fast forward to when I was 15, I had graduated from high school. I also had graduated from English. I had started teaching English. So it was a really wonderful time, because it allowed me to see that I could work toward a goal. And even though I never had that childhood, I continued to believe that I could have that life. And I moved to the capital, to the Dominican Republic capital, which is called Santo Domingo. And there I started to go to college and to, really grow up. I mean, I was 15 and I was living on my own, and I was exposed to all kinds of things, but I lived in a safe place until at age 19, I was actually kidnapped. And during that kidnap, I was brutally assaulted and raped, and I was almost beat up to death. And that was the lowest point of my life, because I had, known violence. I had been through violence so many times and for so long, but I had thought that I had escaped that, and that all of that pain that I went through in my childhood, that it was behind, and that now I spoke English, and now I had a good job, and now I was going to graduate college as the first one in my family. And so I had a lot of obstacles, but I also had a lot of drive and inspiration. I was feeling like, no matter where I go, no matter what I do, I'm going to be beat up. I'm going to be denigrated. I'm going to be humiliated. And I started to question my faith, to question life. I wanted, really to disappear. And that's when I found, the first part of the work that I do today, which I call it motivational shame, which is when somebody is in pain, they go through something traumatic. Usually, people will be saying how grateful they are that you survived, or how grateful they are that it's not worth, like, oh, it could have been worth, or oh, thank goodness it wasn't this, or maybe, wow, you are so strong, or maybe it will pass, or you'll be okay. And I call it motivational shame because really, instead of motivating us, instead of inspiring us to heal, we feel like there's something wrong with us, that we're not grateful and that we're not thriving and that we're not moving through it and past, a point where other people seem to be. And so that was the first time, and for 6 months, I was going between, oh my goodness, something's wrong with me. Why am I not grateful to be alive? Why am I depressed? Why am I, really suicidal? Why are these things inside of me? Why am I feeling all this pain? And why am I doubting? And why am I here? And when I was starting to kind of get back to my routine, I was in a car accident and I ended up in a coma for 8 days. And this unlocked the second part of my work, which is where I found out that when people were crying for me, crying with me, acknowledging and saying, wow, this poor girl, oh my goodness, look at all that she's been through. Look, she can't catch a break. Look at what's happening to her. And I could hear everything. And to be honest, the first thought when I saw all of this happening, and I was seeing my body being rushed to the ER and the electrical cardioversion and all of these things, I was like, no, I don't want to come back. I just rather, like, this is great. I mean, they told me that everything happened for a reason. That's when I believed it. It's like, yeah, I'm done with life. And then I saw people crying, and then I saw people, devastated, and I heard their words and I felt their pain. And that's when I understood that validation is how we help others heal. Because when they validated my pain, and we have this notion of being a victim, but when they saw me as a victim, they saw that I was innocent, that I didn't deserve this pain, and they were with me in my pain. I didn't even have to be conscious to feel it. I understood that they loved me, and it was the first time in my life where I wanted to live, and I wanted to live fully, and I felt loved, and I felt seen, and I felt safe, and I felt supported. And so I love to tell this story because it's such a dichotomy, it's such a juxtaposition of how when we are seeing someone else be in pain, we want to be positive, but instead of that, we need to actually be present with their pain.
Oh man, I love that, because like you took us full circle in a way. And in the beginning, you said something really important. You said just because you became positive, it didn't mean you didn't have to bypass pain. So I think sometimes when people see people who are super positive, they're like, oh, they probably have not been through anything, or they're that way because their life has gone a certain way. And your life was on this trajectory. I mean, you took yourself out of a situation that was a survival environment, right? You took some of the core values of education that your parents had instilled in you, and then you saw something greater for yourself. You created a vision as a kid and you worked toward it. So everything looked like it was on track, and then all these things happened. And I liked how you said, look, I needed to be seen and heard, because I do, as someone who coaches a lot of people, the biggest frustration people feel in relationships is not having their feelings validated, not having a voice, not being seen and heard. That's so simple in a way, but it's something so often overlooked.
Because isolation is already hard enough. You can be around people and still feel isolated. So when you feel like you have a voice, a platform, where people are validating you and it feels genuine, I think that's what gives the confidence necessary to somewhat get yourself out of that isolated mindset and to a mindset of, you know what, I do have a voice, I do have a purpose here. Most people who come from poverty-stricken areas, who come from areas where there appears to be no hope, that's all you hear them speak of, doom and gloom. They look around and they see no life. They see nothing but what's around them. It appears that you saw something greater even at a young age, because you said prosperity. You said, even in spite of where your dwelling place was, you and your brother would go to the trash heap. You saw treasures, but then you said something that was very key. You said, I saw prosperity. How were you able to, really just to catapult yourself out of that poverty-stricken mindset into a prosperity mindset, even though you were still around poverty?
I love the quote by Napoleon Hill, and I don't know it by heart, but he talks about how in every adversity and failure and heartache, there's a little seed of opportunity. And so I hadn't read Napoleon Hill at that time, but I started to read personal development books in Spanish at a very young age. And I remember reading As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. Make it a point to read that with my daughters, because that's when I understood that you are more than your circumstances. I also started to read books that taught me to see myself as someone that is not defined by her circumstances. Now, it's really hard because you have your circumstances and that's all you see. However, it's having the awareness, or being at least open to seeing that where you find it and to not discount it. Because while it's true that I didn't see anything for like that for me, I was able to, when I found it, to treasure it. And I think that's going back to that Napoleon Hill quote, finding that seed of opportunity. And it is a seed, it's tiny. I'm not gonna paint this big picture. It's a tiny seed, but as you nurture it, it can grow. And we see the oak tree, right? We see the little acorn. And I'm 4'8", so I like those analogies of little things, right? But it's just seeing there's one tiny bit of opportunity here. There's one tiny seed of prosperity. There's one tiny seed. So it's both, and without denying that I'm going through a lot, without denying, in that moment, in that landfill, like I had been through this ravine up and down with these gallons and this can, and I was just sweaty and tired and exhausted and sleepy. But when I see my seed of opportunity, I'm not denying that. I'm saying yes, and yes, I'm tired. Yes, it's stinky here. Yes, it's mushy. Yes, there's a seed of opportunity. There's a message here for me that I can gravitate to and that I can grab onto to take my next step. So it's not diminishing and bypassing or denying or dismissing, but it's yes and taking that and grabbing onto it with all your might.
I think we all have that moment of like frustration, anger, unresolved, or feeling stuck, and just feeling like, okay, am I on the right path? Or when is this gonna, come through the right way? Or, because you could feel like you're going down the right path, similar to what you went through, and then some traumatic things can happen and reshape things. But then when you get past that, similar to what you just said, honey, like the middle part, that's that hard part. And then you get to the end, you're like, this all fits together quite nicely. Like
it better fit all together nicely.
I mean, I know when I was going through it, but now I can speak to it in such a way that I never would have been able to speak to it if I didn't go through that middle part. So I just think life journey is kind of like that. It's just so many different sub-steps that we don't anticipate, why something's happening. And that's the hardest part about life. I think in the present, you can look and think of what might be ahead, but you don't know what's coming ahead. Thanks so much for just sharing your experiences, your knowledge, your faith, just your progression of how you went through this journey. I think it will be encouraging to people who just feel stuck and don't know why, or who may need to pause, just like you said, in that moment, or people who may need to just learn to really validate and see people and hear people when they're in pain. And keep doing the amazing work of helping to create the Positive Mom Project out there, and also the TEDx talks where you're telling stories. And now the kids are doing their own TEDx
They're
talks.
doing their own TEDx
So,
talks.
so mama's legacy is living through them. So you're doing a phenomenal job. You just tell people briefly where they can find you if they want to learn more about the work you're doing.
My website is thepositivemom.com, and I'm online and on all of the platforms at The Positive Mom.
All right. Well, you guys, you heard it from Elayna Fernandez. She was here to motivate tonight.
Yes, indeed.
And preach as well.
Yes,
we're gonna leave it there because we know we gave you a lot to ponder tonight. Yes. And we're gonna take off for now. Remember, please to subscribe to future episodes of our show on the Anchor app, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and many, many other platforms. Until next time, XOXO. We'll be back with another great show.